Ladies and gentlemen, it is remarkable how something as seemingly simple as a name can carry the weight of legacy, identity, and even destiny. When we think about naming a child, the process often feels mundane, a social ritual, a passing consideration in the cascade of decisions that come with parenthood. But what I want to explore with you today is how deeply intertwined a name can be with cognition, culture, and the trajectory of a human life. I want to take you on a journey that begins not just with letters on a page, but with neural circuits firing in anticipation, with the ripple of familial and societal influence, and with the profound responsibility that comes with creating the first linguistic imprint of a life yet to fully unfold. In the earliest moments of anticipation, when a child is still unseen, unborn, there exists a cognitive phenomenon that most people overlook. It is called prospection, the brain's ability to simulate futures, predict outcomes, and evaluate countless scenarios without direct experience. Naming a child is not just about aesthetic preference. It is a projection of potential, an intimate interface between the parent's vision and the child's future self-concept. Neuroscientific studies reveal that the regions of the brain activated when we imagine our child's life, what they might achieve, how they might navigate society, what struggles they might encounter, overlap significantly with the same regions used for decision-making, risk assessment, and creativity. This means that the act of choosing a name is not passive, it is an active, deeply cognitive endeavor, a form of mental time travel. Consider, if you will, the phenomenon of self-fulfilling prophecies in human development. Research demonstrates that names influence how others perceive us and, crucially, how we perceive ourselves. In controlled psychological studies, individuals with names that defy convention or carry strong semantic meaning often exhibit different behavioral patterns from those with common, neutral names. Their self-concept, their sense of uniqueness, and even their confidence in taking intellectual risks are subtly affected by the linguistic identity assigned to them at birth. This is not mere superstition, it is biology. Our brains are remarkably plastic, particularly in the formative years, and every repeated interaction with one's own name reinforces neural pathways linked to self-perception, social navigation, and even problem-solving strategies. Now, naming a child is also an act deeply rooted in culture and history. Across civilizations, names have carried profound symbolic significance. In ancient societies, names were believed to hold power over fate. In contemporary times, the semiotics of a name influence public perception, networking potential, and even professional trajectories. Yet, what is fascinating, and what rarely gets attention, is how a modern parent might synthesize this ancient understanding with the rigor of a scientific worldview. Choosing a name can become a fusion of art, science, and philosophy. It is an opportunity to encode values, curiosity, and imagination into the very linguistic fabric that will accompany a child for life. When I made the decision to select a name personally, it was not impulsive. It was an exercise in deliberate cognitive design, a careful orchestration of linguistic resonance, semantic symbolism, and phonetic uniqueness. I drew upon studies in neurolinguistics, cognitive psychology, and even computational modeling to understand how certain combinations of sounds evoke specific emotional responses in both the bearer and the listener. There is compelling evidence that consonant clusters, vowel harmonics, and syllable rhythm can subtly influence emotional perception, memory retention, and social salience. In other words, a name can unconsciously prime behavior, interpersonal dynamics, and even public engagement. This insight, when applied thoughtfully, transforms the act of naming from tradition to intentional engineering. But it is not enough to consider only the neurological and social dimensions. Emotional resonance plays a critical role. The limbic system, which governs emotion, memory, and attachment, responds profoundly to familiar phonetic patterns. When we utter a child's name with care, we trigger a cascade of neurochemical responses in both ourselves and our child: oxytocin release, enhanced bonding, and the reinforcement of trust and security. A name, therefore, is both a cognitive blueprint and an emotional scaffold. It is the first bridge we build between our child's inner world and the external universe. Let me share a personal reflection. In the quiet moments of contemplation, when the world fades and all that remains is the infinite spectrum of possibilities for a new life, the selection of a name becomes almost meditative. It is a dialogue with the future, a negotiation between the limits of language and the boundlessness of imagination. I considered the sounds carefully, the balance of hard and soft consonants, the cadence that would flow naturally in conversation, the symmetry that would look elegant in writing. But beyond aesthetics, I considered symbolism. I considered how this name might inspire curiosity, courage, and a willingness to explore frontiers both intellectual and emotional. A name is a vessel for aspirations. It is a whisper to the universe about the kind of human being you hope to nurture. Science offers further validation. Studies in epigenetics suggest that environmental cues, including social interactions from the very first moments of life, can influence gene expression patterns. While a name alone does not rewrite DNA, it acts as a persistent social cue that informs early experience. When a child responds to a name that carries uniqueness and intention, it may subtly enhance their engagement with novelty, their openness to learning, and even their resilience in the face of challenge. Names, therefore, are not trivial. They are instruments of early cognitive scaffolding. And yet, in the midst of this intellectual exercise, there is a deeply human, almost mystical dimension. Choosing a name evokes awe because it crystallizes the miracle of life into something tangible. It is one of the first gifts we offer, a linguistic fingerprint that encapsulates love, hope, and a sense of responsibility. It is humbling to recognize that this small, seemingly simple choice will echo through decades of development, social interaction, and self-perception. The weight of it is profound, and yet it is suffused with joy. There is also an ethical dimension, which I have always felt acutely. A name is a social contract. It is an introduction to society, a marker that will accompany a child into school, friendships, and eventually professional life. Choosing a name is a responsibility to the child, a commitment to consider how it might affect their interactions, perceptions, and opportunities. Here, the line between personal creativity and societal impact becomes blurred. The challenge is to select a name that is distinctive yet accessible, imaginative yet grounded, resonant yet adaptable across cultures and contexts. Consider, for instance, the case studies in social psychology where individuals with unconventional names experience a dual-edged reality. They may benefit from memorability and perceived creativity, yet also face subtle biases and microaggressions. The balance, then, is critical. A name must empower, not encumber. It must inspire, not intimidate. It must function as a catalyst for curiosity rather than a barrier to acceptance. This delicate equilibrium requires not just aesthetic sense, but deep empathy, foresight, and a willingness to imagine a life that does not yet exist. In making this choice, I also relied on pattern recognition, a skill we often associate with engineering, mathematics, or artificial intelligence, but equally vital in human decision-making. By mapping phonetic patterns to historical and contemporary precedents, considering cognitive load and social resonance, I approached naming as a multidimensional problem-solving task. Each potential name was a hypothesis, tested against emotional resonance, cultural adaptability, phonetic elegance, and the subtle influence it might have on perception and self-concept. In many ways, it was akin to launching a spacecraft. You have the parameters, the physical laws, and the infinite unknowns, yet the goal is to arrive precisely where your intentions align with reality. Of course, a name alone does not define a person. Human potential is shaped by countless factors: environment, education, relationships, and intrinsic curiosity. But the name is the first signal, the initial condition in a complex system that will evolve over decades. It is a starting point, a gentle nudge that may subtly bias the trajectory toward exploration, creativity, and resilience. In this sense, naming is both art and science, emotion and logic, tradition and innovation, a microcosm of the very challenges that define human ingenuity. When I finally settled on the name, there was a profound sense of resolution. It was not a decision made lightly, nor was it guided by whimsy alone. It was informed by decades of observation, study, and reflection on the interplay between identity, cognition, and society. It was informed by the knowledge that every interaction, every utterance, every written record carrying this name would contribute to the shaping of a unique human life. And within that understanding lay a quiet exhilaration to participate in the orchestration of possibility, to offer a child a name that might inspire them to reach further, question more deeply, and live more courageously than they could have otherwise imagined. And yet, beyond all the scientific reasoning, the neurolinguistic calculations, and the pattern recognition, there is a profoundly human truth. Naming a child is an act of love. It is a quiet declaration that this new life is seen, acknowledged, and cherished. It is an act of vulnerability because it exposes our hopes and dreams, our fears and our aspirations in a single word. The name becomes a bridge, connecting the parent to the child in a dialogue that is both timeless and immediate. It is, in its essence, a microcosm of the parental commitment to nurture, protect, and inspire. I reflect often on the way language shapes identity. When we hear our name, our brain responds with a network of activations that encompass recognition, attention, and reward. From the very first moments of life, infants exhibit a preference for the phonemes and intonations of their given names, turning toward the sound, smiling at it, and forming the first neural maps of social interaction. This phenomenon illustrates the profound influence a name can have, not merely as a label, but as a catalyst for emotional connection, cognitive development, and self-concept. In choosing a name, I was not only selecting letters and sounds, I was laying the foundation for a child's capacity to interact with the world with confidence, curiosity, and resilience. It is also important to recognize the interplay between uniqueness and universality. A name that is too conventional risks blending into the background, losing the opportunity to ignite imagination or instill a sense of individuality. Conversely, a name that is too obscure may create barriers in social integration, mispronunciations, or even unconscious biases from those who encounter it. The balance, therefore, is subtle, almost imperceptible, but essential. I approach this balance with the mindset of a systems engineer, evaluating trade-offs and optimizing for long-term impact. Every syllable, every consonant cluster, every vowel resonance was considered not in isolation, but as part of a complex system of human interaction, perception, and development. And then there is the temporal dimension of naming. A name exists in both the present and the future simultaneously. It is uttered in the immediate moments of joy and connection, yet it is also a persistent signal that will echo across decades. Names appear in first day of school photographs, in handwritten notes, in academic achievements, in letters of recommendation, in professional accolades, and in casual greetings on a playground. Each utterance is a reinforcement of identity, a thread woven into the tapestry of experience. By selecting a name personally, I accepted responsibility not only for the present, but for the unfolding narrative of a life. This is the weight and the privilege of such a decision. I also found inspiration in cross-disciplinary perspectives. From anthropology, I learned that names historically carried stories, allegiances, and aspirations. From linguistics, I understood the subtle influence of phonetic patterns on perception and recall. From psychology, I appreciated the interplay between self-concept and social cognition. And from my own reflections in technology and innovation, I realized that naming is not unlike launching a new paradigm. It requires vision, precision, and an awareness of emergent consequences. A name, like a groundbreaking invention, exists within a system of interactions, each influencing the trajectory of what it touches. There is, of course, an element of serendipity. Even with all the calculations, studies, and considerations, there remains the intuitive spark, the moment of recognition that a particular combination of sounds feels right. It resonates emotionally, cognitively, and socially, and it carries an ineffable quality that defies precise measurement. This intersection of logic and intuition, analysis and instinct, is where creativity thrives, where profound decisions are made, and where the essence of human experience is honored. Choosing a name is, in this sense, an act of artistry as much as it is an act of science. When the name was finally chosen, I felt a profound sense of completion. It was as if a complex equation had resolved itself into a simple truth, a single word, perfectly aligned with the hopes and intentions for a new life. The experience reinforced my belief that the most meaningful decisions, those that shape the contours of human experience, require both rigorous thinking and deep emotional insight. It reminded me that the intersection of knowledge and love is not only possible but necessary if we hope to influence life in a positive, transformative way. And yet, as any parent knows, a name is just the beginning. The real journey is lived every day through interactions, teaching, nurturing, and guiding. But a name carries an invisible force, a subtle but persistent influence that shapes perception, identity, and aspiration. By choosing this name carefully, with deliberate intent, I sought to give a child not just a label, but a platform for imagination, a beacon for curiosity, and a shield for resilience. It is a first gift, and like all gifts of love, it carries the hope that it will amplify potential, inspire courage, and foster an enduring sense of belonging. I want to reflect briefly on why this matters in a broader sense. In our society, we often underestimate the profound influence of small, deliberate acts. Naming a child is one such act. It is a moment of creation, a microcosm of the choices we make every day that ripple outward in ways we may never fully observe. Every decision, when executed with awareness, thoughtfulness, and emotional depth, contributes to the shaping of individuals and, by extension, communities, societies, and even the future of civilization. In this context, choosing a name becomes not merely a personal act, but a microcosm of ethical responsibility and visionary thinking. Finally, I want to emphasize that the process of naming, like any meaningful endeavor, is an act of alignment. It aligns intention with action, emotion with cognition, creativity with structure. It is a reminder that the most impactful decisions in life often require us to navigate complexity, uncertainty, and competing priorities, all while remaining grounded in our deepest values and aspirations. In naming a child, I was reminded of the power of deliberate thought, the resonance of love, and the infinite potential embedded in every human life. And so, the name stands as a testament to careful reflection, to empathy, to curiosity, to science, to imagination, and above all to love. It is a word that carries within it the hope of exploration, the courage to question, and the invitation to live boldly. It is a name chosen with intention, insight, and care, a name that is more than a label, more than a sound, more than a symbol. It is a doorway to possibility, a bridge to identity, and a beacon for a life yet to be fully lived. And as I stand here sharing this journey with you, I am reminded that naming a child, and indeed, shaping any meaningful aspect of life, is not a solitary act. It is an invitation to participate in the ongoing dialogue between possibility and reality. Every interaction, every word spoken, every experience shared, builds upon that first foundation, echoing the initial choice with resonance far beyond what we can immediately perceive. The name is the first note in a symphony that will unfold over decades, a signal that the life it represents is cherished, acknowledged, and capable of extraordinary impact. There is something profoundly humbling in this process. To hold the potential of a new life in your hands, even symbolically through a name, forces you to confront the vastness of human possibility. It forces you to recognize that your choices, no matter how small they seem, can ripple outward in ways you will never fully comprehend. And yet in that recognition lies not fear, but empowerment. It is a call to act with intention, to think deeply, and to love fully, because the smallest gestures, the quietest decisions often become the most transformative. I want to leave you with a reflection on curiosity, courage, and responsibility, the three principles that guided this choice, and that I believe are essential in every human endeavor. Curiosity drives us to explore, to question, to imagine possibilities beyond what is immediately visible. Courage gives us the strength to make decisions that defy convention, to embrace the uncertainty inherent in shaping life, and to act in alignment with our deepest values. Responsibility reminds us that our choices matter, not only for ourselves but for those who are touched by our decisions, directly and indirectly, across time and space. In naming a child, these principles converge. In every syllable chosen, there is curiosity about the future and the person this child will become. In every letter, there is courage to imagine something unconventional yet meaningful. And in the act itself, there is responsibility for shaping, however subtly, the contours of identity, perception, and potential. This convergence transforms a simple name into a profound gesture, a gesture of hope, of vision, and of love. So, as we consider the choices we make in our own lives, whether naming a child, launching a project, building a company, or pursuing a dream, let us remember that the smallest, most deliberate acts carry the greatest power. They are not merely functional or symbolic, they are foundational. They shape perception, inspire action, and ripple outward in ways we cannot fully anticipate. They are, in every sense, acts of creation, and they reflect the essence of what it means to engage with the world thoughtfully, intentionally, and passionately. And so, when you hear a name, whether it is familiar or unconventional, take a moment to reflect on the depth it carries, the cognitive, emotional, and social currents it sets in motion. Remember that every name, every choice, every intention is an opportunity to shape not just a life, but the very fabric of possibility itself. We are all architects of potential, designers of futures, and participants in the infinite symphony of human experience. With this understanding, with this awareness, we can approach life with both humility and audacity. We can choose act and love with intention, knowing that even the smallest decisions, like the name we give a child, can echo through the corridors of time, shaping identity, perception, and destiny in ways that are both profound and beautiful. And so, as this child begins their journey in the world, carrying a name chosen with care, with insight, and with love, I am reminded that our greatest responsibility and our greatest opportunity is to engage fully, intentionally, and courageously with the lives we touch, the choices we make, and the legacies we create. Because in the end, it is not just a name. It is a promise, it is a beginning, and it is a reminder that every life we nurture carries infinite potential, waiting to be realized through love, curiosity, and the courage to imagine a better future. Thank you.